In today's show, we're talking NBA draft with Albert Ghim of No Ceilings. Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com. And you can find me on Twitter, as always, at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free. We are available on all platforms. Recording this show out of order as well, so it's recording before Game 1 of the NBA Finals. So I don't even know what's happening in Game 1 or in Game 2, but congratulations to the teams that have won those games. I don't know. So anything that's happened in the last couple of days, that's why I'm not talking about it on this show. But we are here to talk about some NBA draft prospects, including someone that I am very interested to talk about, and that is Amen Thompson. We're going to be talking Jett Howard, Rookie Council, and another highly intriguing player, Emoni Bates, as well as Toumani Camara. They're the five guys we're talking about with Albert Ghim of No Ceiling. So I think it's the first time Albert's been on. We might as well get him in right now. All right, here he is. Let's bring him in. Albert Ghim, welcome to the show.
How are you doing? Appreciate you having me on.
I'm going well. We're getting closer and closer to the NBA draft. We are getting closer to the end of the NBA season, and we are a lot of people are already switching to draft mode, but everyone's going to be there in a week or so after the NBA finals are done. It's an exciting time. We had the withdrawal deadline yesterday. This show's being released about 4 or 5 days later than that. Quickly, was there anything that surprised you though on the withdrawals?
If I had to pick one, I'd say Dembona
Okay.
from UCLA, a guy that our collective at No Ceilings were pretty high on. We're kind of sad that he's going back to school, but at the same time, we can understand. We heard that he's had some issues with the shoulder, wasn't able to really show a lot to teams during workouts and stuff. So I think that's the name that stuck out to me at least.
I think the one to me was probably Trey Alexander. That was a bit of it. There was another one that surprised me somewhat as well. I can't remember who it was, but that one was pretty surprising to me to see Trey Alexander go back to school. But there were quite a few players that went back, and I think part of it is the, I guess, perceived top-end weakness of next year's class as well. Those guys think, well, if we have big years, we can jump from pick 28 to pick 14 or pick 12, or if things go right. And I do understand that to a degree. So it will be interesting to see what happens in college basketball, does strengthen the college basketball field next season. But what I have been asking everyone, Albert, coming on, is the first 5 picks in the draft. We know what the teams are, but what would you do with those first 5 picks? I know what you're going to do at pick 1, but what are you going to do for the other 4 picks?
Pick 1, probably go Victor.
Yeah, okay.
Pretty clear, right? Pick 2, for me, I'd go Brandon Miller. I know that's not like the popular pick. I understand that.
Yep.
I just like his game a lot. I'd go Scoot 3. Think that totally works. And then 4 and 5, I think it's pretty open. For me, I think Jarris Walker needs to go top 4. That's just me. I love his game. Think he's unbelievable. I think he's underrated, severely underrated. And then I'm okay with Cam Whitmore going 5. So those would be my top 5 guys.
That's interesting because it is a little bit different to the way I've done that. I just did a mock draft. Well, I haven't recorded it yet, but it was released before this, and I had Walker down at 7. But I think that I think the top 2 are clearly Victor and Scoot, and then after that, I think I'd probably have Amen a little bit higher. But I think there's 5 or 6 guys that go between 3. I think there's a clear top 8, but then 3 to 8 is pretty iffy. Not iffy. It's like I don't know where they go. Like they whatever decision people make in that spot, I can understand it. So if you think Walker's going to blow up and go pick 4, I get it. I know if you think Taylor Hendricks is there, or Asar Thompson, or Amen Thompson, or Brandon Miller, or whoever, I don't think there's much difference there. That's why when I talked about this with someone last week with the Pistons sliding to 5, it's shit that they didn't get pick 1 or 2, but there's so many good players in that area that might very, very comfortably end up being the 3rd best player in this class.
Yeah. No, I totally understand that. I think Obviously, we're going to talk about Amen later, but I'm a little bit lower on him and Jarris. I know Tyler Metcalf talked about him with you, but
Yep.
I think he's a guy that just wasn't given the opportunity to shine and show off the things that he's capable of doing in college. I think there's a lot more to him offensively that people haven't seen yet, and that's why I have him that much higher.
Yeah, that's what I keep hearing about, all the stuff he used to do at ING. Handling the ball, running offense, all that sort of stuff will be really interesting to see how that develops in the NBA. But now I am glad that we are going to talk about a player that you are higher on, because I actually just did that mock draft and I bumped this guy down. I'm lower on him. So let's hear the counter argument. Let's talk about Jett Howard from Michigan, who had some injury problems during the season. He's 19. He's good size wing, really strong shooter. My concern and my question is, like, what else? What else are you doing? Like, the shooting's great. I love that. But can you do something else? And you're going to sell me on it. What else can you do?
Yeah, I think my biggest thing for Jett Howard is when you have a guy that is that big. He's a big guy, 6'8", might even be 6'9". The biggest thing with him is obviously the shooting is there, the movement shooting is there, really exciting stuff, especially at that size. But also the handle is really special for being a 6'8", 6'9" guy. He's got a really, really tight handle. My co-host Corey Tulba, we do the Draft Act NBA pod together. He was even saying that he might have one of the top 2, top 3 handles in this class, and that's something that I believe was able to show off in spurts. But as you mentioned before, he did struggle with injuries. We just did an interview with Taylor Hendricks as well, and Taylor Hendricks was telling us, like, yeah, man, like the ankle injuries that he had, he was really going through it because he was teammates with Jett Howard before in high school, and so I don't think he was able to flash everything, but also really underrated passer. You can run pick and roll with him. He can make the hook pass. He can make the weak side hit. He can make the little pocket pass, pick and roll stuff. I understand the warts on him. Defensively, he was not the best. However, I thought he did show some growth throughout the season. Rebounding is a real issue for him, considering his size. He really needs to rebound the ball better. But once again, like, I don't want to just put it on the injury stuff, but the injury stuff was real with him. I also think he has a great frame that's going to fill out really well on the next level. And I think with better health, with more athleticism, with the frame that he has, and also, like, he's really flexible, which is something that I don't think we talk enough about, like, as a prospect for his size. When he has the ball in his hand and he's making moves, there's real good flexibility to him that I think is advantageous and makes his handle that much more effective. So I actually see him potentially even being a number 1 option one day if everything pans out.
He's an interesting player because the shooting's obviously interesting, the size is interesting, the lack of defense and rebounding is bad, and that does need to be fixed. But there's so many players who are sliding that you hear, not necessarily sliding, but are perhaps viewed lower by some, including me, that the thing that comes up is, he's injured. Like, okay, Keontae George had this back problem. Did that impact his shot selection and shooting? Maybe. Nick Smith, injured all season. Howard, injured. Derek Whitehead, obviously, the foot injury really hurt him. I think Derek Lively had some injury problems during the season. There's so many of these players who came in highly touted, got injured, never really caught the flow of the team. I think even Cam Whitmore had an injury early in the season as well, and that maybe impacted some of what he was able to do. So there's just so many of these guys who we had these high hopes for. They showed flashes, but they weren't able to get in rhythm, and they got hurt, and they missed time, and all this sort of stuff that does impact so much. And that's why it is a hard class, I think, to evaluate because of that. With Jett, one thing that does stand out to me that's interesting is a solid enough assist to turnover ratio. Now, it's not huge. It's 2.3 versus 1.4 per 36. That's a 1.6 assist to turnover, which is a positive. Is he a guy that, the size is there? We love this shooting, size, playing on the wing. It's all hyper valuable in the NBA. Yeah. Is the passing something? You said he can be a number 1 option. Can he actually be a guy that you can run some stuff through in that regard, or is he just more going to be a shooter and scorer?
I think it's really important to keep the context in mind. He was playing with Hunter Dickinson, and if you watch, that Michigan team, they loved to throw Hunter Dickinson the ball in the post and kind of just let him work. Wasn't always the most effective offense or the most aesthetically beautiful offense to watch. But I feel like in a different context with, more opportunities, like, once again, for me, the 1% outcome for Jett is him being like a number one option. But even if he's a number two, he can run second side stuff for you, can run pick and roll, can make decisions for you in a really healthy way. And I think with more volume and with the handle that he has, the shooting threat, and I really do believe there's passing chops to him. We were just running out of pick and roll stuff. So once again, for me, I really do think that's like the really high end outcome. But even as a secondary guy with his size and shooting and the passing ability with the handle, I think is really, really valuable.
So how high are you on him? Like, are you higher on him than Kobe Buffkin? Is he a lottery player to you? Is he a top 10 player? Like, where is he for you?
So, so people may take this as like a hot take type of thing, but I have him top 5 on my big board. I know.
Let's go.
I know. Yeah. And, but for me, it really is a part of the evaluation, but also a gut thing. I wrote a piece about him back in December, January, and he hasn't moved out of my top 5 because it's just something that I feel in my gut that I think in a different context with better health, with NBA coaching, NBA setting, NBA context, I think it's just going to get better. So he's one of those guys. He's my favorite guy in this class that I would really be willing to take a bet on.
This is where we get to that. That's spicy. I enjoy that. So that means to you, like, Orlando has pick 6 in the draft. They are crying out for shooting. So to you, you're sitting there, Jeff Welt, when you go bang, like, that's it, easy. Let's take Jett Howard. Even though, like, in most cases you might be able to get him at 11, but if you're just going, I want this guy, like, that's does that work for you? Is that perfect for you?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like a couple of years ago when the Thunder went and took Giddey where they did, they had no problem doing that. He was their guy. They took him with full confidence. That's how I feel about Jett. If he was there and I was sitting there at 6, I'd take him no problem. I'd feel great about that pick.
That's one of the things about the NBA draft is I can sit here and go, man, Albert, are you okay? Like, you've lost your mind. But we all get stuff wrong all the time. Like, I had Giddey at pick 6 in that draft, so I feel really good about that. But I also had Killian Hayes at pick 3 the year before, and I feel stupid about that, right? So we all get stuff wrong. NBA teams get stuff wrong literally all the time. So that might work out, and you stick to what you see, you stick what you believe. I'm way lower on Jett than you, and that's totally fine. One of us is going to be right, one of us is going to be wrong. Actually, we might both end up being wrong because I've got him like in the 20s, and he might end up being like the 15th best player in this class. Who knows? Yeah. But there's clear skills there. The size is there. The shooting is there. That's all really good. I'm worried about some of the other stuff, but that's why we have people on to take some different opinions or throw some different perspectives on these players. We're going to get back with a player that you are lower on, and it's a player that I'm actually higher on. So it's good that we can debate this stuff. We'll get to him in a second. But before I do that, today's episode is brought to you by the Game Time app. When you're looking for tickets to your favorite event, maybe it is to see your favorite rookie play their first NBA game, whether it's concerts, musicals, theater, comedy, baseball, hockey, Stanley Cup Finals, Game Time has it all. You don't have to plan this stuff months in advance. They've got their last-minute ticket price options that are there. They throw flash deals out there. They have the lowest price guarantee, the event cancellation protection as well. If you find a ticket in the same section, same row, at a cheaper price, they refund you 110% of that difference. So you're always going to be protected that you're not paying too much for those tickets. You get views from the seat on the app. Everything is there. You couldn't ask for anything more. And plus, they don't email you the tickets. You don't have to dig around trying to find that email. They just send it straight through to the app on your phone. So it's there. Bang, show it. You go in. Easy as you like. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA, and you get $20 off for your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, let's bang a reality check on someone. Bang! Bang! I've been waiting to talk about Amen Thompson for a couple of weeks now. I've done a SAR with somebody, and now we're doing Amen, who I do have at number 3. I just think the athleticism, there's defensive ability, the feel, the vision, the smarts is there, but I'm not going to lie, I'm shit scared of the shooting. It might not ever happen. There are plenty of corollaries of these sort of players who had never developed. Ben Simmons, a little bit different because Simmons never would take threes. He would just refuse to. Amen takes them. The other side of that is Lonzo Ball, who was a bad shooter and became an unbelievably good shooter as a three-point shooter in the NBA, like a 40% guy for multiple seasons, who worked on it with that horrible form and became really good. I believe in the feel, I believe in the vision, I believe in the athleticism. I worry because I nobody really knows how to evaluate overtime elite prospects, Albert. So what is it? What are you worried about? Is it the shooting? Is it the level of competition stuff with Amen? Because I know there are plenty of people who are like, I wouldn't even take any of the Thompsons in the top 15 because I just don't believe anything they did at that level.
Okay. Yeah, that last part was pretty good. I think for me, he was one of the most difficult prospect to scout in this class for me. everything that you said is so spot on. If we start to consider the context, the level of competition that he played, the shooting is a real thing. Now, I did want to go over some numbers, right?
Yep.
In year one in the OTE, he only took 61 total jump shots, which was alarming. For something that we talk about all the time on our pod is that the willingness to shoot has to be there, right?
Absolutely.
And he only shot 29.5% on those 61 total jump shots in his first year. In year two, obviously went up a lot. He took about 114 jump shots, I believe. But the problem is that percentage dipped to 28.9%. And the most concerning number that my co-host Corey Katulaba and Tyler Rucker, they highlighted in their dual piece on him, and actually both the Thompson twins, is that he shot 33.3% on unguarded catch and shoot jumpers.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, this is my biggest concern. And some people are going to take this as me being a hater on him. It's not that I hate on his game at all. It's just I have real concerns because at the time that we're recording this right now, the NBA finals are about to start. We've just gotten through the conference finals. And you have to start to ask yourself, as you're evaluating these prospects, can you see these players play in these types of high leverage moments, situations, series, right? From what we're seeing, if we have a ball dominant guy with a really iffy or terrible jumper, great athleticism, those types of guys tend to scare you a little bit. They tend to not play in crunch time, and they tend to not be as effective. And then I look at Amen and I think, okay, let's see, like, what team does he end up going to, right? If he ends up on a team that already has a ball dominant guard, can he play off ball? My answer to that question right now would be absolutely not. Right. I'm with you. I do think he's an electric athlete. I do think the passing, the feel is absolutely there. Right. The shooting does really scare me, though. In year one, he had that pronounced leg kick, weird posture, a kind of disconnect from the top and bottom of his shot. His follow through was kind of going out at a weird angle. I think, in year two, it looked better. But then today they released a video from, his workout with the Blazers. And you start to look at the mechanics of his shot and it looks awkward again. There's a dip in the right shoulder. It looks like that dip and that turn for him trying to get like his elbow straight kind of turns his whole body. Everything looks disconnected again. And then you start getting worried again, right? And I understand like these open gym workouts, they can be a little misleading one way or another. A couple of years back, if you think about Devin Vassell and the videos that came out with him during pre-draft stuff and everyone overreacted. But with Amen Thompson, we're talking about years of film now of his jump shot really being iffy. And my thing is, if he's a guy that you can't play off ball, but you want to give him a lot of usage and he doesn't have that jump shot, when we're playing slowed down, high intensity basketball in the NBA, how effective will he actually be? And so, you asked me to share where I have Jett Howard at, and I have Jett Howard top 5. Currently, I actually have Amen at 18. So, which I know is a low number for a lot of people, but considering everything that I've said, it feels right to me right now. And I genuinely want to say that this is not me hating on Amen. That's I truly kind of landed at 18 for him. So
no, I
had to throw that in there. Yeah,
I get it. Like I understand that the shooting is a real worry. And you talked about workouts of Devin Vassell, which is a great one because he shot well in college and he shot well in the NBA, but people started to panic about. And even I think that happened similarly with Mikal Bridges. There was some, what's going on? Why has he changed his form? What's happening on the shot? All that sort of stuff. I remember that happening as well. But those guys, you're right, had film and history of being good shooters. And there's literally no evidence at all of a man being a good shooter. It hasn't happened. It's not like, well, this was a bad workout and things didn't go right and he's working on something or it's an injury. It's like it's never happened. And I am worried about that. Yeah, easily. And as I said, this class is so weird, and I've said this multiple times, that someone who gets drafted at 25 might be the 6th best player in this class. There's like 25 guys who I could consider top 10 guys, I reckon, with things moving around, and having him at 18, it's way lower than everybody else, but that's why you look at what you do and the way you think about it. And I get it. I completely understand. I bet a little bit on the athleticism and the passing and the feel and just hope that he can get in there. But I guess now I think about it and dig into it, the fact that he's been at overtime elite, like he's not there to learn schoolers. I can't remember who it was that to play school. Who was that? I think it was like an Ohio State quarterback at one point. Cardale Jones? I don't know. Someone who said that. Like he's not there to do anything else apart from basketball, and it didn't improve. But that gives me some level of concern. Just to contrast that, because there was improvements in Asar's shooting. Where do you have Asar? Like, you significantly higher?
I actually like Asar. I definitely think he took some steps in terms in the right direction with his shooting. I also think he's kind of underrated with his playmaking and athleticism. And also, I like the fact that he kind of played a secondary role to his brother. I actually have that. Actually, I have Asar at 8. And Josh, really quickly, if I can, I think it's really important. Something that I've been talking about a lot recently on different pods as well is that we're kind of in that season now where almost every media outlet has a big board or has a mock draft, and we start to see names next to numbers, and we start to correlate said names with said numbers. And then, when you start thinking about these prospects, you think, Thompson Twins has to be top 5, Cam Whitmore has to be top 7, whatever. But I think it's you have to be careful sometimes about correlating names and numbers, because it's not always the case, and that's not always how NBA teams view these players. And so I did want to throw that in there as well.
No, I agree with that completely, and it is hard to sometimes break out of that. And for example, for me, is someone like Grady Dick, who's people like, he'll go top 10. I'm like, I don't know about that. Like, I've got him, I think I moved him to 15 or 16, and I could see him moving down further than that. Jordan Hawkins, as some people say, at 10. I've got him at a 24. Just moving things around, trying to work out how this all plays out is really tough to do, and we have to sort of stick with what we have been looking at for however long we've been looking at it for, versus getting swayed by. And the other thing that you can get swayed by as well is that some people, and this is hard to differentiate, some people put out a mock draft based on what they feel or based on what they have heard teams are going to do. So if you hear a team is going to take Jalen Hood-Schifino at number 9, do you then get swayed and go, I'm going to push him up my board? Or do you go, no, I don't believe that he's that player, so I'm not going to push him higher. And there's always a distinction between that sort of stuff, which is really intriguing. We've got 3 more players to talk about, including a very interesting player later on in the show. We'll get to that in 1 second, but today's episode is also brought to you by the guys over at Prize Picks. Through the NBA Finals, they've got their $1 million daily Superflex promotion. That means every day someone has a chance at becoming a millionaire. One entry that's placed after 8 a.m. Eastern. We randomly selected every day. Whoever gets that chance gets that 6-pick flex with the following payouts. You get $1 million if you get 6 out of 6. You get 5 out of 6 right, you get 80,000. You get 4 out of 6, you get 16,000. And it all is player projections going over and under, whether it's points or rebounds or threes or different sports: hockey, baseball, NASCAR, PGA, boxing, MMA, and of course the greatest sport of all, disc golf. It is all over there. Go to prizepicks.com/million. You opt in to be eligible to win that $1 million entry. And once you opt in, all you do is play the game like normal, and you get a chance to be that lucky winner. Download the PrizePicks app, go to prizepicks.com, you sign up, and you play daily fantasy sports. You can also get 100% instant deposit match up to $100 if you use our code LOCKEDON. Yeah, just locked on, not locked on NBA, just locked on. If you deposit $100, you get 100. If you deposit 50, you get 50. Simple as that. Enter the promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100 and get in for that $1 million opportunity. All right, let's go to Dayton. Now let's talk about a player who's risen up, I think, recently over the last couple of weeks, and that's Toumani Camara. 21-year-old wing, 6'7", probably a mid to late second round player. The thing that stands out immediately looking at that is 61% true shooting. That's obviously a really valuable number. 10 rebounds per 36, good steal and block numbers, 36% from 3. If all that sort of stuff holds, that's a really strong wing player, an efficient scorer, efficient rebounder, a solid shooter, a good defender. You can't ask for a huge amount more. He's not getting by playing for Dayton, who's a slightly lower level college program. He's not getting by 33 usage. He's sort of sitting in that 25, which will scale back in the NBA. But there's a lot of other things to hang his hat on, which is something I've talked about with a lot of other people, is that these guys, say like a Jalen Wilson from Kansas, who got by with this huge usage playing for Kansas, but how does that work in the NBA? Whereas Camara, I can say, well, okay, even if he gets 17 usage, he's a smaller role player. There's a lot of other stuff happening here. So, are you in on Camara? Because I haven't had him as a draftable player until probably the last week or two, and I have bumped him up just looking into him a little bit more. Where are you with Toumani?
No, absolutely. I think I'm with you. I think as I got into his scout, he's a guy that definitely moved up my board a ton as well. I think with Camara, the thing that's interesting is the first thing you notice with him is he kind of has stilts for arms. Or or when we were growing up and kids were on crutches, they would fool around and act like their crutches were their arms, is kind of what Camara's like. His wingspan is just unbelievable. Great mobility for his size, great vertical pop, has really light and nimble feet on defense. I think he's going to be a multi-positional defender. According to Synergy, he took 72% of his shots at the rim, which explains a lot, right? With the true shooting percentage that you mentioned.
Yep.
Shot 36% from 3 on 2.4 attempts per game, which isn't super high volume, but I thought he shot it well enough at the comment. He had a great showing at the Portsmouth Invitational, then went on to the Combine, played really well there. I just think he's a guy that will offer you a lot of versatility on both sides of the floor. He's also like a pretty good passer too. I think it's something that he needs to clean up a little bit. He can take some risks at times, but he can make like really nice touch passes, interior passes as well. Just, you can run pick and roll with him as a role guy who, is going to have the mobility and the size and the vertical pop to really help there. And like I kind of hate to do the whole same school comp type of thing, but like you can kind of see a little bit of Obi Toppin to him as well, in terms of maybe what his role might look like early on off the bench for that 3 or 4 that you can, rely upon to, give you some solid defense, rebounding, whatever. Although Toppin really had to work on his defense on the NBA. But yeah, I like Kamara a lot. I think he's going to be a really solid wing 4 type of player. That if he continues to increase the shooting from outside, I think is going to help him a lot.
I just realized that on that graphic, his age is wrong. So he's actually 23. He's not 21 because he was a 4-year player at Dayton. Look, the defense I feel pretty good about. The wingspan is really intriguing. The Toppin comparison is interesting. Obviously, the same school stuff. And there's so many like inherent biases we have when we're talking about guys in terms of like, is their name the same? Is their school the same? Are they the same race? Are they the same height? Do they have the same hairstyle? And breaking through that stuff is tough. But yeah, it gives you context in terms of school system, level of opponents, all that sort of stuff as well. So that can be useful. There's always pros and cons to that sort of thing. Yeah. You're right about the 3-point volume with Camara, where the shooting numbers are okay, but they hadn't been until this season. It was 34, 26, 17 through his first 3 years. So the constant improvement is strong, but one thing we always like to look at is what did the free throw shooting look like? And he improved. He went 8 percentage points higher than as a junior, but still only 67% from the line is a little bit concerning there. So in terms of comparing him with these other sort of late riser wing prospects, one that comes to mind is Omax Prosper. Where do you see that comparison between those two?
I see it pretty similar. I actually don't have like a huge gap between the two guys. Obviously, with Omax, he plays really hard, but I think Kamara plays really hard as well. Another thing with Kamara that I wrote in my notes that I really liked about him is thought like he timed his cuts really well. I think like as an off-ball guy, I think that's really, really important. I like the fact that he can finish with both hands in the paint as well. Shows good patience too when he's taking a mismatch down into the block. I think both guys are going to offer a lot in terms of the role that they're going to play, which I think is another important thing, right? We have to make sure to look at these guys within the correct lens. We're not looking at Camara as a guy to be a starting 3 or 4 from day one. But once again, I think as a bench guy coming off the bench and, maybe early on, even just garbage time minutes or whatever, but over the course of his career with more development, NBA coaching, whatever, I can see him being a really solid wing 4 type of guy.
Let's talk about a name who's a little bit more well-known. We'll go to Arkansas, to the SEC, Ricky Council, the 4th. I always love someone that's a 4th. I'm waiting for the first NBA player to come in that's got a 5th as their suffix. It hasn't happened yet. We've had a couple of 4ths. We had Wade Baldwin, we've got Ricky Council, waiting for a 5th. That's got to come soon. So I always love seeing a 4th. But this is a guy who comes in, a 6'6" wing. He's 22, probably an early to mid-second round player, though some people have seen not even have him in the second round at all. And I just look at that and go, all right, 27% from 3, what's going on? Because you're shooting 79% from the line, that's really strong, but that overall efficiency stinks. The rebound and assist numbers, that's per 36 on the screen. They stink. What does he do? Like, there's a lot of name recognition because you played for Arkansas with a lot of other prospects and a strong team. But there are some red flags there.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. He did play on a strong team, but the one caveat that I do want to bring up is, although the team that he played for was strong, the spacing that he played with on that team was not strong, which I think definitely hurt him as well. I think 91% of his jumpers came off the dribble, which is tough, right? And obviously, I think he won't be asked to do on the next level. He only shot 30% on them as well. But the thing with Council is that he can pretty much get to the rim at will. Really, really good athlete, good first step. It's just the outside shooting is not there. But as you mentioned, I've always believed that free throw shooting is a great indicator for the type of shooter that you're going to be and the type of shooter that you actually are. So the fact that he was right at 79%, I think is a really, really good number and gets you excited, right? Because once again, in the NBA, lower usage, more spacing, maybe that shooting does get better. But in terms of the mechanics of the jump shot, I will say, like, considering the athlete that he is and the type of lift that he gets on his mid-range jump shots, it's weird that from 3 he doesn't really jump at all. It's a really low lift, and I thought, there were some inconsistencies with his base and his footwork. But overall, he's a wing that has some good ball skills, can handle the ball. Another guy who can kind of run second side stuff for you. Pretty good passer. I like the fact that he can make passes with both hands as well. My actual concern with him was on defense.
Okay.
I actually thought he was pretty flat-footed as a defender. Didn't think he had the quickest feet considering how athletic he is, but I think he did compensate for a lot of that with, his physique, his strength, his athleticism, and his length. So he's a guy that I kind of have in my 40s and 50s type of range. Not a guy that, I'm looking at even considering with a first-round pick, but a guy that, if you grab him in the 40s and 50s, and you could look at him to develop as a 3-and-D type of wing.
I've got him at 44 at the moment. In the mix with guys like Jordan Walsh around that area, Andre Jackson, Jalen Wilson, Camara is a little bit lower than that, but in that sort of area. How much change for him, because he played for Wichita State previously before coming to Arkansas, and some of the numbers are a little bit different playing at Arkansas State. If I just bring up his numbers there, he shot 44% as a freshman, limited attempts, but he was at 85 from the line there. He came off the bench for Wichita State and then moved into a starting job with Arkansas. So it is a little bit hard to see or contextualize the improvement from year to year because there's a change in school and system. What do you make of that change? You're moving schools to the bigger school, playing a bigger role. Is that just an age thing? Is that a development thing? How have you been able to pass that through?
That's such a hard question because it does kind of depend on context too, right? But I think the context that he ended up playing in Arkansas, I think was interesting, right? Just because Nick Smith Jr., as you mentioned earlier, he did struggle with some injuries. There were stretches where Ricky Council was actually asked to do more, right, than he, as we mentioned before, will be asked to do in the NBA. And so I just feel like the competition level that he played on, with Arkansas was different for sure, but just the role. I think that role question is such an important question and an important context piece for us to bring up per prospect. It really does depend. And I think there at Arkansas, obviously he had Anthony Black there, who's great on the ball, but also a guy that can function off the ball as well. And so Council was asked to play make a little bit. He was asked to go and get a bucket once in a while. He's asked to, do stuff in isolation, which is just not his strength. And it's going to be something that, once again, I think if we look at now the next step, right, the next transition for him to an even harder level in the NBA, that has to be priority number one, really reducing that role, simplifying things for him and saying, hey man, from the beginning, we just need you to continue to work on shooting threes. So spend the off season, lock yourself in a gym, take 4,000 threes a day, whatever you need. And we want to simplify your role in the NBA, where we want you to be a solid defender, take threes. And then obviously, as you develop as a 3-point shooter, leverage that into opportunities at the rim, because as we mentioned before, freak athlete, does a great job of getting to the rim and attacking.
The next guy, it's a really tough one. This is the last guy we're going to talk about, and it's Emoni Bates, who was, I remember sitting down and watching, right, we're getting this televised. Chet Holmgren, Emoni Bates, high school game. Everyone was watching it. It was a big buzz thing that was happening. He goes to Memphis, flames out, really, transfers back to Eastern Michigan, and raw numbers, 19 points in 34 minutes a night. Okay, sure. But there's so much context that's got to go behind this, because that's high usage, it's low efficiency, it's poor shot selection. He's obviously really he's tall, he's really skinny. There's some off-court concerns, I think, here as well with Bates. And now that Zach Edey's gone back to school, I believe that Bates is going to be the guy where I get multiple people saying, man, you got to take him in the lottery. He's a top 10 guy. And there'll be other people saying, no, we don't do it. But he's going to be the guy that gets overvalued because he was that number 2 recruit coming through high school, higher than Paolo Banchero, Jabari Smith, Jalen Duren, these sort of players. He's going to get this base hype that comes through from a lot of the high school stuff where, I'm sure you knew about it, Albert. You hear about this guy since he was 14. This guy's the next big thing coming, and it just hasn't worked out at all. Why? Is it a mentality thing? Is it you are just taking the wrong shots and you cannot sort of be corrected, and you've run from whatever happened in Memphis, and now you're trying to go to this bad school and be the number 1 guy, and you were the number 1 guy, but it didn't translate into good offense necessarily, or efficient offense. Are you just out on him ever discovering this?
Oh, I think it's a really difficult discussion, right? I think in a lot of ways, it almost feels like it was a social experiment, what Emoni Bates went through,
Yep.
Him being kind of, cast as like the second coming of whoever, and at such a young age, and he had so much hype around him from such a young age as well. And I think it's tough. I think on a basketball level, like him going to Memphis in year one, playing for Penny, tried to make him a point guard, which I mean, that from the start was a bad sign and should have never happened, in my opinion. But to answer your question, I think for me, where I'm at right now is if I was working for an NBA front office, I actually wouldn't draft him at all, is where I'm at with Emoni Bates. I think it's everything that you mentioned, right? If we talk about on offense, he's got a quick release, deep range, supreme confidence in himself. I think that's putting it in a nice way, right? Him having that supreme confidence in himself can also be detrimental to himself and to the team at times, I think. But to be fair to him, our very own Maxwell Bomback of No Ceilings wrote a piece on him and was talking about how, he has developed as a finisher at the rim. He has a really good floater, good touch overall at the rim. Even on defense, right? There are signs of him getting better. He's got some real black hole tendencies, some absolutely paltry passing numbers, just does not pass at all. I think he's a limited, bad athlete. Don't like his frame at all. I think obviously he's going to fight to add more weight and mass to him. I just don't think right now he's so skinny that from day one, NBA players are going to be licking their lips when they see him on the floor. They're just going to go at him. And I think anybody, whether it's a 1, a 2, 3, like 1 to 5, everyone's going to see him on the floor and they're going to go at him. Is where I think he's at physically. So I love the fact that he's a player that believes in himself, a guy that took a shot by going to Eastern Michigan to try to rejuvenate his stock. But I don't see it with him at all. Once again, if I was an NBA team, I actually wouldn't draft him.
At the moment, I've got him at 62, so I'm with you on that one. So much of what you said there, I agree with. And he comes, I think, moving to Eastern Michigan, if he had gone in there and just dominated and took all the right shots and made them efficient, you go, all right, okay, this is sort of what we were seeing. But he didn't. Like, he got the ball a lot. He was able to do what he wanted, and they still didn't go in. And taking, again, on a lesser team, it's going to be harder for you to do it. But if you want to prove that you're this player, that's what you got to do. Like, in that level of competition, you have to be able to do that, and you have to be able to make those shots go in at that high level with all the other deficiencies that you have. I'd say what he sort of reminds me of, not 100%, but someone who I thought was a pretty highly rated prospect coming out of high school, struggled in college, and that's Brandon Boston, who I think showed a few little things in the NBA. They're not exactly the same player. The level of hype of Boston was nowhere near what it was for Bates, even through high school or college, but a guy that had that level of like, oh, okay, you're a first-round player, a lottery pick talent coming into college and then really struggling at Kentucky. And, of course, Boston came out. He didn't transfer to a lower school the way Bates did. But he's shown a few things in the NBA that make me think, oh, maybe he should have been drafted a little bit higher. So I can see that argument. But every other argument to me with Bates is just... I don't think I would do it. I'm with you. I wouldn't draft him at this stage because there's just too many negatives, and I didn't see enough from him this season to make me think that he's reined in some of the issues that we have.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with you. I've never been like a big advanced stats guy, but one thing that we've been talking a lot about at No Ceilings is box plus minus, and he had a negative 0.7, which really is not that is not good at all. And I think that reflects everything that you said. And as you mentioned, he played for an Eastern Michigan team where he was kind of given the reins and he was given the freedom to do what he wanted, and his shooting percentage barely went up. I think it's very similar.
I think it was 39 versus 40 if I look at it. Yeah, 39 versus 40.
So, I mean, not much there. I'm with you. I think he's a huge risk. And I didn't even bring up the off the court stuff because I honestly don't know enough. But if there's even a hint of that to go with everything else that I said about my concerns with him as a prospect, he's kind of a hands-off type of guy for me.
One of the other things to look at is having the ball that much. You've got to get more than 5 free throw attempts per game. I think like at that level, you should be getting 7 or 8. You should be attacking the rim and being able to, but he can't. Like that's part of the problem is the size, the frame, the shot selection. That at that level, when you are that number one guy and your usage is that high, but it's all on jumpers. Really, like you're not putting that pressure on the rim as much as you need to. And that's where if you had seen him go to that level and just dominate guys and get to the line all the time by pressuring the rim. You'd have a little bit more confidence in it. But 5 is not a bad number. But when you play 34 minutes a night with 31 usage, like it needs to be 7, needs to be 8, needs to be really just putting that pressure on it. And that's part of that problem there. But I'm sure there's going to be plenty of people, Albert, that disagree with us on Bates, and people will say, he's got to be a first rounder. we've seen all these flashes. I'm with you. I'm not there on Bates. But that brings us to the end of today's show. Albert, thank you for coming on and chatting about these prospects. Tell us what you've got cooking over at No Ceilings at the moment.
Oh, well, at No Ceilings, this is literally the busiest time of the year. We're doing pods like this all over the place. We're pumping out free content 5 days a week, as I'm sure all my other, cohorts and teammates have been mentioning on here. But Josh, just want to say, really appreciate the opportunity to come on. Been a fan of yours for a while. Listen to your fantasy basketball stuff for my teams that always end up in like 5th and 6th place. So that always hurts, but appreciate the time.
Not at all, Matt. Thank you for coming on. It's been great to have you on. And that will do it for me today. Don't forget to follow this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and on the Odyssey app. And if you are here on YouTube, thumb it up and leave those comments down below. Tomorrow, I believe we're doing a 76ers season review show. That might change because I'm recording this 4 or 5 days before it's being released, but hopefully that's what we're doing. Did I say all the things to do? Yeah, you know what to do. Comment, subscribe, follow, blah, blah, blah. We're good. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.